What happens when a smug talk show host picks a fight with a woman who's faced down tougher battles than his cheap jokes? The air in the studio of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert crackled with unease that night. The lights glared down on the sleek set, where Stephen Colbert leaned back in his chair, his grin sharp as a blade. He'd invited Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising star known for her fierce fight for healthcare reform, to his show. But this wasn't about fairness. Colbert had a plan, one his producers had cooked up to spike ratings. Mock her policies, trip her up with snide remarks, and watch her squirm. It'd be easy, he thought. She was just a politician, not a match for his quick wit and loyal crowd. He didn't know Jasmine Crockett. Not at all. The audience clapped as Crockett walked out, her navy suit crisp, her eyes scanning the room like a general before battle. She sat, her posture straight, her smile polite but tight. Colbert wasted no time. After a few fake pleasantries, he leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "So, Congresswoman, your big health care plan, it's going to fix everything, right? Save the world, one hospital bill at a time?" The crowd tittered, egged on by his tone. Crockett's jaw tightened, but she kept her cool, her voice steady. "It's about making sure people aren't choosing between medicine and food, Stephen. That's worth fighting for." Colbert smelled blood. He cut her off, his laugh sharp. "Oh, come on, Jasmine. Sounds like a fairy tale. You really think you can push that through Congress? It's a pipe dream, and you know it." The audience laughed louder, some clapping, feeding his ego. He leaned closer, his eyes glinting with malice. "Admit it, you're just grandstanding for votes." Crockett's fingers gripped the armrest, her knuckles paling. She wasn't here to be his punching bag. She'd faced down opponents in courtrooms and committee rooms, men who thought they could bully her into silence. This was no different. "You want to talk pipe dreams, Stephen?" she shot back, her voice low but cutting. "How about a talk show host? Who thinks he's smarter than everyone else?" The crowd gasped, a few chuckles breaking through. Colbert's grin faltered just for a second, but he doubled down. "Ouch, touchy," he said, faking a wince. "Guess the truth stings, huh?" He turned to the audience, playing for laughs. "Folks, she's mad because she knows I'm right." The room roared, but Crockett wasn't done. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "You're not right, Stephen. You're just loud. And I'm not here for your circus act." The tension was a live wire now, sparking between them. Colbert's face twitched, his charm cracking. He hadn't expected her to bite back, not like this. His plan was unraveling, and the crowd could feel it, their laughter turning to murmurs. Crockett didn't blink, her voice rising just enough to command the room. "You invited me here to talk about real problems, not to be your prop. So are we going to have a real conversation, or are you just going to keep hiding behind your desk?" The audience hushed, sensing the shift. Colbert's eyes narrowed, his fingers tapping the desk. He wasn't backing down either. "Oh, we're talking, Congresswoman," he said, his voice cold. "Let's talk about how your plan's going to bankrupt the country." The stage was set for war. Crockett's heart pounded, but she was ready. She'd come to talk about saving lives, not to play his game. Colbert thought he could humiliate her for a few cheap points. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The studio lights seemed to burn, hotter as Stephen Colbert leaned back, his smile now a thin, venomous line. He'd underestimated Jasmine Crockett, and that stung. Her last words, calling out his circus act, hung in the air, and the crowd's murmurs told him he was losing his grip. He needed to hit harder, make her crack. He tapped his pen on the desk, a deliberate, mocking rhythm, and tilted his head. "Congresswoman, let's get real," he said, his voice oily with contempt. "You talk a big game about saving lives, but isn't this just a stunt? A small-town lawyer turned politician. Chasing headlines? I bet you love the spotlight more than you love your voters." The audience sucked in a collective breath, some jeering, others whispering. It was a low blow, dragging her past into the fight. Crockett's eyes flashed, but her face stayed stone cold. She'd heard worse, from courtroom rivals to political foes. Colbert wasn't special. She leaned forward, her voice steady as steel. My past? I fought for people who couldn't fight back, Stephen. What about you? Hiding behind a desk, making fun of people's struggles for laughs. Who's chasing the spotlight here? The crowd stirred, a few clapping, their loyalty wavering. A woman, in the front row, nodded, her lips pursed. Colbert's fingers tightened on his pen, his smirk twitching. He hadn't expected her to turn it back on him. He pushed on, his tone sharper. Oh, please, Jasmine, you're out of your depth. Healthcare reform? You're pushing a fantasy that'll cost trillions. Your voters deserve better than empty promises from someone who's just winging it. He waved a hand, dismissing her, and the crowd laughed, though. It was weaker now, less certain. Crockett didn't flinch. She sat taller, her words slicing through his mockery. Empty promises? I'm fighting for people who can't afford a doctor, Stephen. What are you fighting for? Higher ratings? A bigger paycheck? Tell me, what's your cause? The room went quiet, the weight of her words sinking in. A man in the back clapped slowly, then another joined. Colbert's eyes darted to the audience, his control slipping. He forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. You're good at speeches, I'll give you that, he said, his voice tight. But let's talk facts. Your plan's a mess. Experts say it'll crash the economy. You're selling dreams you can't deliver. He leaned closer, his gaze cruel. Face it, you're not cut out for this. Stick to small-town cases, Congresswoman. The jab was personal, meant to wound, and the crowd gasped, some booing softly. Crockett's heart raced, but her resolve was iron. She locked eyes with him, her voice low and fierce. You want facts? My plan's based on real numbers, real people. You'd know that if you bothered to read it, instead of parroting what your writers feed you. And don't talk to me about being cut out for this. I've fought harder battles than you'll ever know, and I'm still standing. The audience erupted, applause breaking out, louder now. A woman shouted, Go, Jasmine! Colbert's face reddened, his charm crumbling. He opened his mouth, but Crockett cut him off. You don't get to lecture me about my work when all you do is mock it. Try living one day in my shoes, Stephen. You wouldn't last. The crowd roared, their support swinging hard toward Crockett. Colbert's hands shook slightly as he gripped the desk, his eyes burning with fury. He'd wanted to humiliate her, but she was turning the tables, exposing him as a bully. The producer in his earpiece hissed, Fix this, Stephen. He forced a grin, but it was a grimace. We'll see who's standing when this is over, Congresswoman, he said, his voice low and venomous. The battle was far from done, and he was ready to play dirty. The studio buzzed with raw energy, the audience caught in the crossfire of a verbal war. Stephen Colbert's grin was gone, replaced by a hard, calculating stare. He'd lost ground, and the crowd's growing cheers for Jasmine Crockett burned in his ears. His producer's voice crackled through his earpiece, urging him to land a knockout blow. He straightened, his voice slick with false confidence. Congresswoman, you talk about fighting for people, but let's check your record. He held up a note card, waving it like a weapon. You voted against a bill last year that would have helped hospitals. So much for your healthcare crusade. Hypocrisy much? The audience gasped, some murmuring in shock, others booing. It was a dirty move, twisting her vote to smear her. Crockett's breath caught, her eyes narrowing. She knew the bill he meant. A flawed piece of legislation that looked good on paper but hid poison pills that would have hurt patients. Colbert was banking on her stumbling, but she was ready. She leaned forward, her voice calm but razor-sharp. You're digging deep, Stephen, but you got it wrong. That bill had clauses that would have let insurance companies jack up prices. I voted no to protect people, not to hurt them. Check the fine print next time. The crowd stirred, some clapping, impressed by her clarity. A man in the third row shouted, "Tell him, Jasmine." Colbert's jaw tightened, the note card crumpling in his hand. He hadn't expected her to know the details, let alone fire back so fast. He tossed the card on the desk, his voice rising, sharp with frustration. "Nice dodge, but come on. You're just spinning it. People see through you. You're all talk, no action." The accusation stung, and the audience wavered, some jeering. Crockett's hands clenched, her mind racing. She'd spent years fighting for fairness, losing sleep over families buried in medical debt. This wasn't just an attack on her record, it was personal. She took a slow breath, her voice softer now, but heavy with truth. "You want to know why I fight, Stephen? I grew up watching my mom work 2 jobs to pay for my dad's medicine. He died because we couldn't afford enough. That's not spin, that's my life. I'm in Congress to stop that pain for others. Can you say the same about your work?" The studio went silent, the weight of her words sinking in. A woman in the crowd wiped her eyes, nodding. Others clapped, the sound building like a wave. Crockett's vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength, and the audience felt it. Colbert shifted in his seat, his face flushed. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out strained. "Tough story, Congresswoman, but sob stories don't fix bad votes." He was grasping now, his cruelty laid bare. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. Boos rippled through the room louder than before. Crockett didn't let up, her voice steady again, cutting deeper. "You're right, stories don't fix things, action does. That's why I'm fighting for a plan that helps people, while you're here throwing cheap shots." The audience roared, applause shaking the studio. A man yelled, "Shame on you, Stephen." Colbert's hands trembled on the desk, his eyes darting to the producer's booth. He'd miscalculated, and the room was turning against him. He opened his mouth to retort, but Crockett was already speaking, her words like a hammer. "Keep digging, Stephen. Twist my record, mock my work. It won't change the truth. I'm here for people who need help, not for your applause." The crowd erupted, standing now, their cheers deafening. Colbert's face was a mask of fury, his plan in ruins. He had one last chance to strike back, and he wasn't about to go quietly. The studio was a pressure cooker, the audience's cheers. For Jasmine Crockett still echoing as Stephen Colbert sat rigid behind his desk. His face was a storm of rage and desperation, his plan to humiliate Crockett reduced to ashes. The crowd's boos stung, their allegiance now firmly with the Congresswoman, who'd bared her soul and stood her ground. His earpiece buzzed with his producer's frantic orders to salvage the segment, but Colbert was past caution. He needed to destroy her, to claw back control. He leaned forward, his voice low and venomous, each word a calculated dagger. "Congresswoman, you paint yourself as a hero, but let's talk truth. Word is, your healthcare push is just a front. You're cozy with big drug companies, lining your pockets while preaching reform. Care to explain that?" The accusation landed like a bomb. The audience gasped, some shouting in disbelief, others frozen in shock. It was a vile lie, a baseless smear pulled from thin air, but Colbert delivered it with such conviction that doubt flickered in the room. Crockett's eyes widened for a split second, her breath catching at the sheer audacity. She'd faced smears before, but this was a new low, even for him. Her hands steadied on the armrests, her mind racing. She could feel the crowd's eyes on her, waiting, hoping she'd fight back. And she would, harder than ever. She rose from her chair, standing tall, her voice ringing with controlled fury. "That's a lie, Stephen, and you know it. I've never taken a dime from drug companies. My record's clean, and my fight's for people, not profit. You're making this up because you've got nothing left." The crowd erupted, applause thundering, some standing again. A woman yelled, "You tell him, Jasmine." Crockett stepped closer to the desk, her gaze boring into Colbert's. You think you can slander me to save your ego? I've spent my life proving my integrity. What have you proven? Sitting there spitting lies for claps? Colbert flinched, his confidence cracking under her intensity. The audience's cheers were a tidal wave now, drowning his smugness. He tried to interrupt, his voice shrill. Oh, come on, Jasmine. Everyone knows how politics works. You're not that pure. But the crowd wasn't having it. Boos rained down, loud and unrelenting, cutting him off. Crockett didn't waver, her words slicing through the noise. Everyone knows? No, Stephen, that's just your world, where truth doesn't matter if it gets you laughs. I'm not here to play your game. I'm here to change lives, and no lie you tell will stop me. The room shook with applause, the audience on their feet, chanting her name. Colbert's face was ashen, his hands gripping the desk as if to anchor himself. He'd overplayed his hand, and the crowd saw him for what he was, a bully undone by his own cruelty. Crockett stood unwavering, her voice rising to a powerful crescendo. You invited me here to mock me, to tear me down for your show. But I'm still standing, and I'm not alone. These people see you now. They see me, and they know who's fighting for them. The audience's roar was deafening, a wall of sound that buried Colbert's fading bravado. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His producer's voice in his ear was silent, the booth as stunned as the host. Crockett's takedown was complete, her integrity shining brighter than his lies. She sat back down, her posture regal, her eyes never leaving his. The battle was hers, and the crowd knew it. But Colbert, cornered and humiliated, had one last chance to respond, and it would seal his fate. The studio vibrated with the audience's fervor, their chants of Jasmine's name a relentless tide that battered Stephen Colbert's crumbling facade. He sat hunched behind his desk, his face pale, his eyes darting as the weight of his defeat pressed down. The crowd's boos and cheers for Crockett drowned out the frantic buzz in his earpiece, his producer's voice now a useless whisper. He'd tried to break her with lies, to salvage his show with a vicious smear, but Jasmine Crockett stood unbroken, her presence commanding the room. The audience was hers, and he knew it. Yet pride or panic drove him to try one last time, a desperate bid to claw back some dignity. Colbert forced a shaky laugh, his voice thin and strained. Well, folks, that's quite a performance, he said, glancing at the crowd, hoping for a lifeline. Congresswoman, you're passionate, I'll give you that, but let's calm down, huh? This is just a talk show, no need to get so serious. The words were feeble, a plea disguised as a joke, but they fell flat. The audience jeered, their disapproval a sharp rebuke. A man in the front row shook his head, muttering, Too late, Stephen. Crockett tilted her head, her expression one of quiet disdain, letting him squirm in the silence. She stood again, her movements deliberate, her voice steady and piercing. Just a talk show? No, Stephen. This is where you chose to attack my work, my life, my integrity. You don't get to wave it off now. The crowd roared, their applause a thunderclap. Crockett stepped closer to the desk, her eyes locked on his, unyielding. You thought you could tear me down for a few laughs, but you forgot something. I fight for people who've been counted out, people you'll never understand. And I don't back down, not in Congress, not here, not ever. The audience leaped to their feet, their cheers shaking the studio walls. A woman in the back shouted, That's right, Jasmine. Colbert shrank in his chair, his hands limp on the desk, his smirk long gone. He opened his mouth, but Crockett raised a hand, silencing him without a touch. Save it, she said, her voice low but final. You've said enough. America's watching, and they see you now. A man who'd rather lie than listen. I'm done with your games. I've got work to do. She turned to the audience, her face softening, her words warm. Thank you for standing with me. Let's keep fighting for what's right. The crowd exploded, their ovation a wave of awe and admiration. People clapped, hugged, wiped tears, their faces alight with pride. Crockett gave them a nod, her smile genuine, then sat back down, her poise unshaken. Colbert stared at the desk, his voice gone, his show in ruins. The producers signaled to cut to commercial, but the cameras lingered, capturing his defeat and her triumph. The audience kept cheering, their voices carrying a message that would echo far beyond the studio. As the lights dimmed for the break, whispers spread through the crowd, then to the streets, then across the country. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just won a fight. She'd shown what strength looks like. She'd silenced a bully, not with shouts, but with truth, leaving a nation stunned and inspired. Colbert's show would go on, but that night, it was hers. And America wouldn't forget.